This story is a work of fiction, inspired by real events. Names, dates, locations, and identifying details have been changed or dramatized to protect privacy and enhance the narrative. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental or used fictitiously. This content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not aim to glorify crime, promote violence, or pass judgment on real individuals. Viewer discretion is advised. Some scenes may contain mature, disturbing, or triggering content. What you are about to watch could have happened anywhere, to anyone. It's inspired by real events. Whispers of truth, buried beneath layers of fiction. We've changed the names, the dates, the locations, but the emotions, the betrayal, the fear, those are real. This story is not meant to accuse, only to reveal, to make you question, who do you really trust? If stories like this keep you thinking, long after they end, hit subscribe, smash like, and drop your theory in the comments. Now watch closely, before the truth disappears again.
The day Marcus and Tiana Coleman found out they were pregnant felt like a miracle. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of praying. 3 years of watching other couples get what they wanted most. But that morning in Houston, Texas, everything changed, a tiny blue line, and a flood of tears they couldn't hold back. They held each other in the kitchen, right next to the coffee pot that had gone cold. The laughter came easy. The silence that had once filled their home was replaced with plans for the future, baby names, paint colors, and a promise that this time, life would finally be kind to them. Marcus said he'd be the kind of father he never had. Tiana smiled and said, "You already are." For a while, it felt like love was healing everything that had gone wrong. They didn't know it then, but what started as their happiest moment would soon lead them down a path that changed everything they thought they knew about love, loyalty, and each other. Stay with me. Because what happened next will make you question how fast a dream can turn into a secret, and how one secret can destroy everything. Before the story reached the news, they were simply Marcus and Tiana Coleman, a young black couple in Houston, Texas, trying to hold on to love while building a life from scratch. Marcus was 32, a construction foreman who took pride in hard work. He wasn't rich, but he was reliable, the kind of man who left early, came home late, and still managed to call his wife every lunch break. His hands were rough, his laugh was soft, and his dreams were simple, a family, a house, and peace. Tiana was 28, quiet but ambitious. She ran a small online boutique and worked weekends at a beauty supply store to make ends meet. She'd grown up around women who held their homes together even when life didn't make it easy. When she married Marcus, she said, "At least with him, I can breathe." They'd been trying for a baby for 3 long years. And when it finally happened, in the summer of 2023, it felt like a blessing that erased everything that came before. Family gathered around. Tiana's mother prayed out loud at the dinner table. Marcus's mom, Loretta, made her famous mac and cheese and hugged her son longer than usual. The Colemans weren't rich, but they had something that money couldn't buy, faith, and a sense that all the waiting had finally been worth it. Still, beneath the warmth, real life didn't slow down. Bills grew heavier. Marcus worked extra shifts to pay for the baby room, while Tiana handled her business alone. She missed the man who used to dance with her in the kitchen. He missed the woman who used to wait up for him at night. Neither one said much. They both assumed things would settle down once the baby came. But that quiet distance, that emotional gap they thought would close on its own, was already creating space for someone else to step in. And his name was Derek Miles. Derek Miles was 29, easygoing, familiar, the kind of man people naturally trusted. He and Tiana had known each other years ago, back in youth choir at St. Matthew Baptist Church. He'd recently moved back to Houston after losing his job in Dallas. When he reconnected with her online, it started innocently, liking her maternity photos, commenting on the baby names she posted, offering congratulations. Tiana said it felt harmless, just an old friend from back in the day. Marcus had met him once, briefly, when Derek dropped off baby clothes as a gift from his mom. There was no reason to be suspicious. But by early fall, Derek started showing up more often. He offered to help around the house while Marcus worked late, fixing the back fence, carrying groceries, painting the nursery. To neighbors, it looked like kindness. To Tiana, it felt like attention she hadn't felt in months. Derek listened when she talked about her fears, the swollen feet, the restless nights, the loneliness of being home alone. She'd laugh and say, "Marcus barely notices when I change my hair." Derek always did. He wasn't perfect, just human. Unemployed for a while, living paycheck to paycheck from side jobs. But he carried himself with confidence, and that made him dangerous in ways that didn't look dangerous at all. The kind of danger that feels like comfort, until it's too late. Their conversations grew longer. Late-night messages, simple at first, "You okay?" or "Can't sleep either." Then came the kind of words people don't say out loud when they're married. She told herself it was emotional support, nothing more. But emotion, once fed, rarely stays quiet. By October, neighbors noticed Derek's car parked outside more often, not just evenings, but afternoons too. No one said anything, it wasn't their business. But whispers spread. Houston communities have eyes everywhere, not police eyes, but church mother eyes, next door eyes, cousin eyes. And still, Marcus didn't notice. He was focused on overtime, on baby furniture, on the future. He told his friends he couldn't wait to see his daughter born. It was a calm before something no one expected. Because inside that house, 3 people were living 3 different stories. Each one certain they knew how it would end. It was October 14, 2023, a warm Friday night in Houston, Texas. The sun had long set over the quiet streets of Pearland. Streetlights buzzed faintly, and the sound of crickets filled the silence between houses that all looked the same, peaceful from the outside, fragile on the inside. Marcus Coleman, 32, left his construction site just before 7. Payday. He laughed with his foreman, said he'd grab ribs for his wife on the way home. "She's craving meat like a linebacker," he joked. No one who saw him that night could have guessed he was heading toward the last evening of his life. At 8:06 p.m., Marcus called Tiana. No answer. At 8:27 p.m. his truck was seen leaving the highway exit near their neighborhood. The ride home was less than 15 minutes. Between 8:30 and 9 p.m., the Coleman's quiet house became the stage for a tragedy no one could have predicted. Upstairs, faint R&B played from a small Bluetooth speaker, soft, slow, romantic. The kind of song that once belonged to Marcus and Tiana, before the distance between them grew. At 8:41 p.m., a Ring doorbell 2 houses down captured Marcus's truck pulling into the driveway. He stepped out holding a takeout bag and a bouquet of daisies, Tiana's favorite. Inside, muffled laughter drifted from the bedroom. He paused halfway up the stairs, frowning, confused. And then he opened the door. What he saw froze him in place. Tiana, 7 months pregnant, and Derek Miles, the man he once called a friend. There was no scream at first, just the sound of shock filling a room too small for 3 people. Then came the shouting. The word the neighbor's dog reacted to. A crash, something falling. A single cry that ended in silence. 8:55 p.m., Derek's sedan sped down the street, captured by the same Ring camera. He didn't look back. 9:11 p.m., Tiana made a brief call to her cousin. 23 seconds of panic and tears. The cousin later said she could barely understand her, only that Tiana kept repeating, "He fell, he fell." 9:29 p.m., the first 911 call. When paramedics arrived, Marcus was lying near the bottom of the stairs, unresponsive. The takeout bag and flowers were beside him. He had no weapon. No wounds from a knife or gun. But a deep contusion on the back of his head, consistent with impact from a heavy fall. 30 minutes earlier, he had walked through that same door smiling. Now he lay on the floor, eyes open, staring at the ceiling fan that never stopped turning. When police entered the Coleman home, they walked into silence. No sign of a break-in. No weapon in sight. Just the hum of a ceiling fan spinning over a life that had stopped moving. Marcus Coleman lay near the bottom of the stairs, unresponsive, his phone inches from his hand, a bouquet of daisies beside him. The takeout bag he'd brought home was still warm. It was 9:34 p.m. Paramedics worked quickly, but it was too late. The call came in at 9:29, and by 9:38, Marcus was gone. One of the responding officers described it later as a scene too quiet for what had just happened. Tiana Coleman, 7 months pregnant, stood in the hallway, barefoot, trembling, her hands pressed to her stomach as if trying to hold herself together. She was crying but struggling to speak. All she could say at first was, "He fell, he just fell." Inside the house, nothing looked stolen. The television was still on. Dinner plates were on the counter. A faint smell of candle wax and sweat hung in the air. But something about the space felt disturbed. The rug beneath Marcus's body had been shifted. A glass lay broken near the couch. Water pooled near the baseboards, not from plumbing, but from something wiped clean too quickly. A towel found in the sink was still damp. Detectives immediately noted the signs of panic. Someone had tried to tidy chaos. Not to hide evidence, but to make sense of it. When officers began their initial questioning, Tiana's story came in pieces. She said Marcus had come home unexpectedly, that they argued, that she tried to calm him down. Then, silence. When pressed about what caused the argument, her answers blurred. She said he just got angry and slipped trying to leave. Investigators marked her words carefully. The fall was plausible. The hardwood floor beneath the staircase was slick, freshly polished. But the wound on Marcus's head told a deeper story. The medical examiner's report later confirmed a fatal skull fracture, consistent with blunt force trauma during a violent fall or struggle. There were also minor abrasions on his forearms. Signs that he'd raised them defensively, even if only for seconds. A baby monitor left running in the nursery recorded 3 distinct thuds between 8:50 and 9 p.m. After that, muffled crying, then silence. That device, meant to capture an unborn heartbeat, had instead recorded the last sounds of a fight that no one saw. By morning, police had sealed the home as a potential crime scene. Yellow tape crossed the front yard. Reporters gathered, asking the same question neighbors couldn't stop whispering. What could have caused such violence in a home that looked like love? Only after hours of retracing steps did investigators begin to piece it together. A second set of footprints, size 11, on the tile near the back door. Unfamiliar fingerprints on a half-drained water glass. And a single car captured leaving the street at 9:05 p.m., minutes before the 911 call. That was when the tone of the investigation changed. What had looked like an accident was starting to feel like something else entirely. By Sunday morning, the Coleman home sat in stillness again, sealed off, tagged, and photographed from every angle. Detectives replayed bodycam footage frame by frame, hunting for what emotion might hide. In one quiet moment, Tiana's eyes drifted toward the back door, not the stairs. That single glance changed everything. Outside, behind the trash bins, officers found a crumpled gray t-shirt with a faint smear of blood near the collar and a torn seam. A fingerprint on the back door handle matched neither Marcus nor Tiana. And tire tracks pressed into the damp Texas clay matched a black Nissan Altima, the same car caught on a neighbor's camera at 9:05 p.m., fleeing without headlights. For days, police replayed that clip. 3 seconds of footage, and in those 3 seconds, a life unraveled. The taillights blinked twice, once like panic, once like regret. When cell tower data came in, the pattern was clear. One phone, unregistered in the household, pinged near the Coleman home at 8:56 p.m. and again on the I-45 ramp 15 minutes later. The number belonged to Derek Miles. When detectives questioned Tiana again, they skipped the small talk. Who was there before Marcus came home? The silence lasted nearly a minute. Then, softly, Derek. She said he was an old friend, that he'd stopped by to check on her, that Marcus wasn't supposed to be home yet. Her voice broke on the last sentence, as though time itself had betrayed her. Derek was brought in that evening. He didn't resist. He admitted he'd been there, he admitted he'd run. He claimed Marcus attacked first, that he'd pushed back, and Marcus lost his footing. He kept repeating one phrase, "I didn't mean for it to happen." The autopsy, completed 2 days later, confirmed a single fatal impact to the back of the skull, blunt force trauma from striking the edge of a wooden stair rail. The injury was consistent with a backward fall after a shove. Whether it was impulse or anger, science could not tell. Time of death, between 8:52 and 8:55 p.m. 3 minutes of confrontation. A lifetime of consequence. With that report, the case stopped being about a fall. It became about responsibility, and the thin line between mistake and crime. In the weeks that followed, Houston grieved one of its own. The Coleman's church hosted candlelight vigils, neighbors left flowers on the porch where laughter once lived. Marcus's mother, Loretta, sat outside every morning with coffee and quiet tears. She said she kept expecting to hear his truck pull up. Some habits of hope die slower than the people we lose. Tiana stayed with her sister. Her pregnancy continued, though her voice rarely did. When investigators asked about that night, she answered in fragments, too fast, too loud, too late. Her doctor said stress could harm the baby, she said guilt already had. Meanwhile, prosecutors weighed the evidence. No weapon. No intent proven. Just fingerprints, blood, and panic. The charge became manslaughter, not murder, involuntary, the statute read. When officers placed the cuffs on Derek, the sound was quieter than anyone expected, a metal whisper over a silence already full. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps as he turned himself in. He said only, "I'm sorry." Nothing more. Houston divided overnight. Some called it a tragic accident. Others called it betrayal wearing the mask of mercy. But every voice agreed on one thing: Marcus had died protecting a home he helped build. Loretta prepared for the birth herself. She brought brisket and banana pudding to the nurses, because in Texas, grief still knows how to cook. When the baby arrived, she named her Marcia Coleman, after her father. She said when the child opened her eyes, the room felt like both loss and forgiveness had found the same heartbeat. Tiana never returned to the old house. She sold it quietly and moved across town, starting therapy and raising her daughter with help from her family. Each October 14th, she visits Marcus's grave with a single daisy, the same kind he brought home that night. The official file on Marcus Coleman closed that winter. But for the people who loved him, the case never really ended. Because when love and silence share the same room, truth becomes an echo, one that keeps replaying long after the music stops. The day Marcus and Tiana found out they were pregnant was supposed to mark a beginning. Instead, it became the memory everything else was measured against. The day that began with new life ended with a silence no heartbeat could replace. The trial of Derek Miles began in August 2024, nearly a year after Marcus Coleman's death. By then, the headlines had faded, but the weight of what happened hadn't. Inside Houston's 246th District Court, everything felt heavy: the air, the silence, the grief that refused to settle. The prosecution called it reckless passion, a moment of anger that ended in irreversible tragedy. The defense called it a tragic accident, a single shove that turned fatal. Both were right, and that made it harder to watch. Tiana sat in the second row, her daughter Marcia asleep against her shoulder. She didn't look at Derek. She didn't look at the jury. She just stared at the floor, tracing invisible circles with her thumb against her wedding ring. A habit she hadn't broken even after her marriage was. When the medical examiner testified, the room went silent. The prosecutor replayed the timeline, the confrontation, the fall, the fatal blow. 27 seconds that changed everything. Derek didn't deny pushing Marcus. He said it was instinct, that Marcus lunged first, that he only meant to protect himself. The jury deliberated 6 hours before returning their verdict, guilty of manslaughter. The judge sentenced Derek Miles to 10 years in state prison. When the words were read, he lowered his head and whispered, "I'm sorry." And for the first time, everyone believed he meant it. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Loretta Coleman, holding a framed photo of her son, stood beside her pastor and spoke softly. Justice doesn't bring him back. But it tells the truth. And sometimes, that's the only thing left to hold. Though questions lingered about what Tiana knew, investigators found no proof she'd taken part in the violence. There were no fingerprints tying her to Marcus's fall. No coordinated plan. No evidence she encouraged or intended harm. For prosecutors, the law was clear: without proof she helped cause the death, she couldn't be charged as an accomplice. And her immediate calls for help, first to her cousin, then to 911, suggested panic, not guilt. The district attorney called her a witness to tragedy, not a participant in it. Tiana's silence after the fact wasn't a crime. It was grief. And under Texas law, grief isn't punishable. She may have escaped prison, but not the memory of the man who walked in, or the silence he left behind. The months that followed brought slow healing. When baby Marcia took her first steps, Loretta said it felt like Marcus was walking again, through her. Tiana eventually returned to work, quietly rebuilding her life. She began counseling, moved across town, and raised her daughter with help from her sister. Every October 14th, she visits Marcus's grave and leaves a single daisy, the same kind he brought home the night everything changed. The community never forgot. At their church in Pearland, a plaque beneath the stained glass window reads, "In memory of Marcus Coleman, proof that love without honesty can't survive, and truth delayed can still destroy." In the end, truth didn't come from the courtroom, it came from the silence left behind. Marcus Coleman's story isn't just about betrayal or loss, it's about how fast love can become memory, and how some mistakes live longer than the people who make them. We tell these stories not to reopen wounds, but to understand how easily life can change in a single heartbeat. If this story moved you, share it, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more true stories that remind us, behind every headline is a heartbeat, and behind every tragedy, a truth worth hearing.